This is Sarah Levitt with the Making Magnificence project. And today, I'm super excited. I've had this idea for a while to interview you. Today, my guest is Nick Schacht, Chief Commercial Officer at SHRM. And Nick, you've also held multiple executive positions throughout your career, yes?
Correct.
Like before this, it was Chief Strategy Officer at SHRM, but before that, you were in multiple executive positions, including CEO?
Yeah, I've been CEO and president of 5 or 6 different companies before coming to SHRM. Most of my career before SHRM has been in the learning and development space.
Yes.
I've also had a stint in consulting, a stint in the military, and so on. My career, as you can tell by what's left of my hair, my career has been a bit of a long one at this point.
Well, welcome. I'm super excited to have you here because I think for a number of reasons, but one of them being that you kind of have a front row seat to business and talent and that intersection. So let me kind of start there
Sure.
as we begin our interview. So, what? Well, actually, let me back up. How many members does SHRM have? Your
SHRM has
membership is giant.
just shy of 340,000 members at this
Yeah,
time.
giant. And that's global, correct?
That's global, although most of those members are in the US.
Okay. So you've got a pretty good snapshot then. And of course, this is across industry as well. I mean, I work
Yep.
across industry and you guys are not niched either. So you've got a pretty good window into the front lines of business and talent in that intersection. So what would you say let's start here. What are the kind of trends that you're hearing and seeing among your members, the questions they're asking, the issues that are most in the forefront of their minds?
Our members have a range of responsibilities and roles. So we serve members from early career HR professionals, mid-career, senior and executive HR professionals. We have we have organizations as members as well. So we have the individual membership and
Mm,
organizational membership. There is the constant drumbeat of how do HR organizations and HR professionals and organizations provide the best employee experience that they can for their employees. And that's myriad factors. I mean, we have a whole body of applied skills and knowledge that lays out everything that an HR professional has to be able to do to be competent. So there's a constant need to learn and understand the developments in those spaces. There's a constant compliance drumbeat as well. And that never really alters, except that the topic du jour may change from one year to another. But there are two main things that are going on now that are different than the norm. First is our members and organizations in general are addressing the issue of how do they create productive workplaces and positive environments for employees in an increasingly polarized society, where we are steadily moving away from this notion of civilized discourse when it comes to just about any issue. I mean,
yes.
you open a website, you pick up a newspaper, you listen to a show, a podcast. Everybody's got an opinion, and increasingly, anybody who doesn't share that opinion is wrong. Yet organizations can't work that way. If organization is going to be effective, its people have to unify around a fairly consistent culture, moving in one direction for the organization to work well. HR kind of gets caught up in this because HR is in many ways the steward of the organization's culture.
Yes.
So one of the things that we've done at SHRM this year is engage in a broad campaign to encourage and promote civility in organizations. And that helps by, we start by defining what civility is and what civility isn't, or defining what
Yes.
incivility is.
Yes.
We've done a lot of research around it. We found that, there are literally hundreds of millions of acts of incivility every day. So we set ourselves a very modest goal of encouraging and getting people to document 1 million civil conversations in 2024. We're very pleased with this because we're getting a lot of interest in, okay, how do we do this? I mean, you think about HR professional has employees who span from the far left to the far right of the political or social spectrum.
Sure.
And so you got a lot of people with a lot of different opinions.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, some of our US governors have an interesting initiative that about 2 dozen of the nation's governors are engaged in this initiative, which they is very similar to ours. They've got a really great catchphrase that I wish we had thought of, and that's simply disagree better. We're going to
Mm-hmm.
disagree. Let's figure out how we disagree and
Yep.
still maintain productive, are able to function as a society or as an organization. But this is one of the big things that HR professionals are encountering. And if they don't deal with it, it threatens
Mm.
to fracture the workplace. Because if you think about what happens in the way of, I'm going to tell HR, I'm going to report to HR, I'm going to
Absolutely.
file a
Yeah.
grievance, all that
Yep.
kind of stuff.
Yep.
So that's one big one. The second big one,
Can I pause you for just a
yeah,
second?
absolutely.
What did you come to understand as civility?
Civility is a combination of respect and courtesy
Mm-hmm.
in terms of dealing with other people. It doesn't mean acquiescence, it doesn't mean
Yes.
changing your beliefs, but dealing with other people in a courteous way that comes from a position of the respect of the individual.
Yes.
Even if you vehemently disagree with
With
them,
their position.
yeah,
Yes.
we can still behave
Yes.
respectfully and courteously. And that
Yes.
really is the bedrock of civility.
It's interesting. You say I'm remembering many, many moons ago when I was in college, I was a philosophy student. And there was a class that was modern philosophy. So we were often discussing kind of
Mhm.
issues of the day. And I remember I still remember this, Nick. There were professors saying, distinguishing between kind of argument and an ad hominem attack.
Right.
Right? Ad hominem is about the person.
Yeah.
Um, philosophical argument is about the content. And yeah, and it sounds like you're kind of circling something similar, like be courteous and
Yeah, you have
yeah,
a set of ground rules for how you deal with the person, and then dealing with the topic or the issue at hand is where you focus your argument,
yes.
but also recognizing that the goal is to find a path forward for the organization at some point.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So that's issue kind of something that's trending and in the forefront. And
Yeah.
what's number two, would you say?
Well, you can guess what the other one is because it's already in a bunch of the questions you send me. It's AI. How is how is AI going to impact the world of work? What do we do with AI?
Yes.
And I mean, there's a ton of different angles of attack on this, but increasingly, what we're trying to do is set a context where HR becomes the go-to clearinghouse for a process by which an organization can approach its adoption of the various forms of AI, because generative AI is
Mm-hmm.
one of those.
Hmm.
But how do we make managers, how do we make individuals effective in exploring the use of AI, leveraging where appropriate? What are the pitfalls and the bear traps you
Yes.
want to stay out of and all that? HR is kind of uniquely positioned to perform that role.
And so you led me into my you led me perfectly, segued us perfectly, Nick, into my next question. So from your vantage point,
Hmm.
because to your point a second ago, I mean, you cannot open the newspaper, any newspaper these days, publication, without AI being on the front page. And
Yep.
so, my sense is it's going to be with us for quite some time. The discussion and the debate is
Yep.
going to be with us for quite some time. So, given that, what do you see as the potential advantages for use of AI within the talent sphere of an organization?
The benefits of AI within the talent sphere, I mean, they're just a subset of the benefits for the entire organization. But let's step back a little bit first and examine the term AI.
Mm-hmm.
I hate the artificial part of it because there's nothing artificial about it. All right. These are intelligent systems by pretty much any definition of intelligence you want to use. But instead of for the A, let's substitute amplified instead of artificial.
Oh, interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if you think about the role of an amplifier on a stage, I was just at a concert last night, so front and center view of
Right.
it.
Right.
What does the amplifier do for the human voice? It makes the human voice louder,
Louder.
human voice able to be heard by more people.
Yep.
It allows us to add different effects to the human voice.
Yeah.
You think about people who are verbal beatboxers, right? Um,
It's
and
great.
but you think about that, you can't do that without an amp. You can do it, but you can't do it really effectively without an amplifier. An amplifier really makes that something.
Yeah.
Um, so if we think about AI as an amplification of human intelligence, the real thing that we try to get people to think about is a little equation: AI plus HI equals ROI. Take
Mm-hmm.
artificial intelligence or amplified intelligence, and then you use that to augment human intelligence. Then you get the real bang, you get the real ROI. Now, AI has a lot of different forms. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you've got basic automation as a form of AI. Using your phone to help you make, pick reservations for dinner tonight at a restaurant is a form of AI. You've got analytical uses of AI, where you've got analytical tools that employ AI techniques. You've got predictive AI. You've
Mm-hmm.
got
Mm-hmm.
machine learning, where you code in a series of rules into the machine and then let the machine learn and learn and learn. I mean, this is basically, how do you program a video poker machine? You create a neural network and then you apply a set of rules over it, and then you have two of those machines play poker against each other billions of times
Yeah.
to learn from that.
Yeah.
And that's another form of artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And then finally, we have generative AI, which has captured
Mm-hmm.
everybody's imagination for the last year and a half. The reason Gen AI captures everybody's imagination is because we can interact with it more than we can most of these other types, unless we're very specialized with our skills. And we also worry about, is generative AI going to replace me somehow?
Yes. So that, yes,
Um,
that I want to get to that. Yeah.
all of these aspects can affect the talent sphere, the people sphere, HR. I mean, you've got increasing numbers of tools that are able to take in and evaluate information more readily than ever before. So one of the things that we talk about a lot and we sometimes worry about is talent acquisition tools. So you think about the fact now that the tools that are out there for an individual who's searching for a job, I can just spray and pray my resume everywhere. I can put my resume out in 1,000
Yeah.
places. From the employer's perspective, that means for a job posting where I might have previously gotten a dozen or 2 dozen responses, I now get 100 or 1,000 responses, which is way more than any human can effectively go through in any reasonable amount of time. So using these tools and using their natural language processing capability, we have the ability to sort through and classify resumes, or job applications or whatever, effectively and easily. The risk and the challenge is your intake system encumbered with any kind of a bias that's
Mm-hmm.
been encoded
Mm-hmm.
in?
Yeah.
That's a whole discussion path that you can spend hours and hours on.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
let's assume for a moment that we have a relatively unbiased system. Now, what I've done is accelerate the talent acquisition professional's ability to get to the most promising candidates for the role quickest and engage them in discussions and move toward a hire quicker than before. Um, Another aspect that's going to be coming down the road is in the area of what we're calling skills first workforces, or skills first workforce management. What we mean by that is we have for a long time historically put a lot of weight on credentials. You have a college degree in this, you did these jobs,
Yes.
therefore you're a
Yes.
good candidate for
Yes.
that. But a better way to effectively match candidates and positions is to describe each in the context of the skills
Mm-hmm.
that are required for the role and the skills possessed by a candidate. So you've got a role with a skills portfolio. The candidate has a skills portfolio, which you can match against that portfolio, that job description, and then you can see where the gaps are. Theoretically, the candidate with the least total gaps is the best candidate for the role. That sounds really simple, except that there's no common language right now for defining skills, for matching the equivalency of what you might say communication skill is, what I might say communication skill is. We use different vocabulary for this. And this is true across industries, across populations. Um, in the Army, if you're a motor pool driver, for example, you have all the skills required for a commercial driver's license in the US. Yet you don't match up by matching
Yeah, that's a great example.
the the
Yes.
um
Yes.
the documentation together. So what will happen when we start leveraging AI for this is that you'll use natural language processing engines to sort through what you put in your resume, what I put in my job description, and finding the equivalencies as we're talking about communication or project management or
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and essentially what we're creating is a smart real-time universal translator for skills. Can't do it without AI. So to get to
Mm-hmm.
a skills first philosophy where we are hiring people based on skills or placing people based on skills or developing people based on skills, we can't really do it until AI comes to the forefront and creates a world. So those are just a couple of examples. But in all those areas, automation, analytics, predictive, those all are areas where AI is impacting the world of people management. And HR professionals need to become really, really skilled in those areas.
And so you know what I'm going to ask you next.
Yeah.
So a couple of things. Where are the concerns and the risks that need to be mitigated? What are they?
Principal concerns. So there's real and there's imagined.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about imagined first. All right. The reality is there has never been an introduction of technology that did not change the jobs landscape. Okay. When
Yeah,
we
sure.
first introduced the plow behind a horse, that changed the job landscape. When we
Mm.
first introduced a harvester,
You
that
made a
changed.
great pun there. Plow changed the landscape. Go ahead.
I'm glad you caught that. Um, but
I'm
but
paying
but
attention, Nick. What can I say? I'm paying attention.
but in that vein, you can't go today to any construction site anywhere and tell me that you can find one person reminiscing, gee, I wish we could dig these holes with a shovel the old-fashioned way.
Right.
I mean, it just doesn't happen. At the
Right.
same time, when these folks were displaced by mechanical equipment,
Mm-hmm.
when the diggers were displaced by mechanical equipment, there
Yes.
was the same kind of concern.
Yes.
So we know that AI will alter,
Excuse me. I'm so sorry.
bless you.
Thank you. Thank you.
We know that AI will alter the jobs landscape. We know that we can't
Yes.
predict that. What we can do, though, is adopt a skills-based mentality for continuing to develop and evolve people as
Mm-hmm.
we evolve their skills, prepare people for new roles, new positions, even if they're not in the same place. But we have a kind of a saying at SHRM, which is, we have HR professionals who say, "Am I going to lose my job to AI?"
Mm-hmm.
Our
Mm-hmm.
first answer is no, you're not going to lose your job to AI, but you will lose your job to somebody who knows AI better than you do.
Mm-hmm.
So you
Mm-hmm.
better get smart about AI. And at
Mm-hmm.
the end, your landscape is going to change. But I have a really good example of just a very practical way that works for us. One of the things that we and Microsoft both believe is that you introduce AI at the individual contributor level in the organization. A manager can't tell a person where to best use AI, but the people can figure out, I could try it here. What happens if I do this?
Mm-hmm.
We were having this discussion on one of my all hands meetings 6 months ago, and we're talking about AI. And I said, look, has anybody got examples of how you've used AI in the last week? And Melissa Turk raised her hand, and Melissa has the responsibility for being part of the operating team for our Women in Leadership Conference, which brings 1,000 women together in person for an intensive learning experience over 4 days. We get evaluations out of that, and the evaluations have open-ended questions. Two of those questions are, what are the things that you think we should keep doing at will and are the most valuable? And what do you think it needs work or should not be done anymore? So part of Melissa's role is summarizing those questions, 1,000 responses to each. She said, yeah,
Mm,
Chat GPT to help me summarize those responses. I
yeah.
put them all in
Yeah.
Chat GPT and came with a list of the top 3 things we should keep and the top 3 things we should change. I said, that's really great. How long did that take you, Melissa? It took me about a half an hour. How long did it take you before
Yeah.
ChatGPT? I never finished it.
Wow. Wow.
So all of a sudden, we have this trove of
Yeah.
information that Melissa now doing this, maybe she's cut out some of the stuff she used to do in this manual job that she never finished, but she can take this information and now apply it to how do we improve the next offering and the next and the next and so on.
Yeah.
So it changes the character of the job. It changes what people will do. So that's kind of the imagined risk, right? Um, the other imagined risk is, well, what if people cheat on the job? They're
Mhm.
using Chat GPT to write their memos instead of
Right.
writing them themselves. The answer
Right.
is,
Yeah.
I don't care. Chat GPT might be a better writer than they are, as long as they're not plagiarizing somebody else's stuff, right? Um, that brings us over to some of the real risks. The biggest risk
Yes. Yeah.
right now are what are the rules around intellectual property and trademarks and safeguarding your company's data. If you're not clear about what AI tools you're using and how to use them, you don't know whether the data that you enter into it, the information you enter into it, is going to be uploaded to the web for the tool to use in its overall self-education, right? So you need to know what you're doing and the
Interesting. Yeah.
impact is. You also need to know what the rules are around if you go to the public version of ChatGPT or, pick any of the other AI tools out there, um, and you use it to generate something, can you or can you not copyright it? Or
Mm-hmm.
if you use that product as a basis for something you then adapt and modify, can you or can you not copyright it?
Yeah. Yeah.
This is murky. It's not been decided yet,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
there
Interesting.
is going to be a lot of evolution in the law around this. Um, there's going to be a whole bunch of risk around essentially deep fakery,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and whether it's written or audio or video or
Yes.
whatever.
Yeah.
Um, I don't even want to start predicting what the risks might be there, but organizations have to be aware of that. At the same time, these are not reasons not to use the tools. They're reasons to get familiar with the tools,
Hmm.
understand what can be done, and understand how to educate the workforce and what can be done. You can educate them on the swim lanes as the swim lanes evolve.
And develop kind of risk mitigation and
Yeah.
awareness. Yeah, it's interesting when you're talking about deep fakery. I'm thinking back to the beginning of our conversation, how that ties to civility, right? So
Yes.
not jumping to conclusions too quickly. Um, so we've been talking about kind of the cutting edge and the
Yeah.
forefront. What are the basics, Nick, that are not changing? The fundamentals that leaders, because those are the people I work with, people who run companies. What do they need to be thinking about? Um, and aware of with regard to talent in their organizations. I mean, it's always, it seems to me, going to be the case that people want top talent giving it their all. But what are some of the fundamentals that are not going to change?
Well, that is one right there. That's what everybody wants, top talent. Everybody says we only hire top talent, and everybody lies.
Yeah, totally.
Because it's not only top talent that's available out there. I
Totally.
mean,
Yes.
we all have
Yeah.
populations that have normal distributions, right?
Right.
Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
so yeah, let's look at a couple of things and a couple of things that are going on. There's a lot of bizarre language out there about some of these things. Like we want people to bring their authentic selves to work. No, you don't. I mean, you want people who are going to work to fit within your culture. If part of
Mm-hmm.
your culture is, I mean, we have a part of our culture. We have 6 guiding principles. One of our guiding principles is something we call challenge, decide, and commit. So we want people to challenge. We want people to push against the walls, but we also want people who, once we decide on something, they commit to the path that we're going to follow, right? If your authentic self is you just like to argue, I really don't want that authentic self
Leave that
either.
at home. Thank you. Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, we have to think carefully about this language. The problem is we sometimes are coddling to generations that have been, and we talk about trophy generations and so on, where a lot of the world has been bent in their direction, and the world doesn't work that way to that level. We have to figure out how to bring them along and incorporate them in our culture and incorporate the strengths that they bring to the culture, but they have to fit within a culture if an organization is going to work. So that's something that is consistent and you have to keep working with. if I think about the role of leaders, I don't know if you and I have had this discussion, but for me, there are 5 things that leaders do if they're going to be
Mm,
effective in the organization. All right. And those don't change over time. And I'll preface that by saying one other thing I wanted to say is, look, I've been around long enough to have seen we now have 6 generations in the workplace, right? With the
yeah,
introduction of
wow.
Gen Alpha, right? I remember back when I was a younger boomer and Gen X was coming in and the magazine articles were, oh my God, what are we going to do about these Gen Xers? They're going to
Yes.
upend everything. And then
Yeah.
we see Gen Y and
Yeah.
millennials
Yeah.
and Gen Z, the same articles with the
Yes.
same
Absolutely.
concern.
Yes.
So every new generation tends to befuddle the older generations a little bit, but that's
Agreed.
okay. As leaders, though, there are 5 things that we're responsible for doing. The first is establishing a common vision among the people that we are leading and working with. What are we all trying to do together? And to some extent, help people understand where they fit in that vision. Because without that vision, you've got a herd of cats, right? And there's
Absolutely.
going whatever
Yeah.
direction.
Yeah.
The second thing is, and this is where leaders can be uniquely positioned, is ensuring that there are effective communications among the people that we're leading and between our teams and other teams. And this is important because one fundamental truth about people is we are really badly wired at communication. It's something we have to learn. And
Yeah.
so if leaders spend time ensuring, yes,
Yeah.
we are talking about the same things and working toward the same goals, and we all understand them the same way, that
Mhm.
clears a lot of the mist
Yeah.
out of the air,
Yeah.
right?
And it harnesses too. I'm hearing like it harnesses their effort, the effort of
Yeah.
everybody that's involved. Yeah.
In the direction of that vision,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
So number 3 is by virtue of their position, there are resources that leaders can provide that people can't get otherwise.
That's
Resources
great,
can
Nick.
be
Yeah.
information, they can be time. I can tell you, no, don't focus your time here, focus it there. I can
Yes.
help you prioritize.
Yeah.
It could be people, it can
Mhm.
be money, it can be physical resources, whatever. Leaders can provide resources to their team that are needed for the team to do what they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
The corollary to number 4 is similarly by virtue of their position, there are barriers that leaders can remove that
Yes.
otherwise people can't somehow get around.
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
now, once a leader's done those first 4 things, vision, communication, resources, and barriers, number 5 is get out of the way and let your team
Mm,
do their stuff.
yeah.
This is the thing that frustrates people in organizations most is when
Yep.
they don't get to exert some level of autonomy and control. And as a leader, we have to be, in most cases, I mean, look, there are extreme examples where you've got 0 degrees of tolerance and you've got to be just so. Most of our lives are not like that. It's got to be okay for people to approach tasks differently than we as leaders would do it, as long as they get to the same result. How they get to that result isn't always completely important.
Yeah.
So that's a common framework for leadership that doesn't change regardless of what the technology is,
Mhm.
regardless
Mhm.
of whether you're dealing with a 1 generation or a 5 generation difference and so on. Um, those are the basics. I mean, employees and organizations they want to feel respected. They most common most common desires that we see in our employees on our employee surveys is they want to understand how they connect to the strategy. That's the vision thing.
Yeah, totally.
Want to know what the paths are for their career development. And they want to feel like the organization is helping them move their capabilities and their careers forward.
Yes. Yes, that there, yeah, that there's a pathway. And if it's not
Yeah,
immediate, that at least it's being looked at
exactly. And
and
that
regarded.
is it's available to them. I mean,
Yes.
it doesn't do you any good to say, oh, you stay here, you could win the Super Bowl. I mean, how many people are really going to do that? But you stay here, you could win a seat at the Super Bowl, maybe is a little more realistic, right?
So the kind of this five-legged stool framework um, is absolutely about fundamentals. To my earlier kind of observation about clients always, no matter what industry,
Mhm.
wanting to get superior performance out of their teams, their senior leadership teams, the people they're leading. um, beyond this five-legged stool framework,
Yep.
anything there, Nick, observations about um, getting more from already very high performing people? But, and the reason I'm asking is because, the world of business is such that it's constantly in flux.
Yep.
So whether that's a competitive edge that might be changing, whether it's a pandemic, whatever, I mean, the pandemic was significant, but um, I regard the world of business as always kind of being in flux and uncertain.
Oh, you're right.
And so meeting that uncertainty requires not just good performance, but a level of kind of thought and innovation and stick-to-itiveness and resilience, those kinds of things. So what can particularly senior leaders be doing with regard to kind of getting more there?
Two things. The first is promote a culture of learning in the
Yes,
organization.
yes, amen.
All right. And learning takes many forms, right? There is directed learning, there is informal learning, there's self-directed learning, but focusing at least part of the learning on continual skill development
Mhm.
for people. I mean, a common example coming from our conversation is building the skill level with regard to implementation of AI across an organization.
Mhm.
Keep building skills. Even if an individual doesn't necessarily need a skill set right now, the process of having a learning mentality and a regular desire to learn will serve the organization well. The flip side of that is as people learn, as they grow, they're going to have ideas. Create channels for the exploration of those ideas, whether those
Yes,
ideas are incremental improvement, like basic process improvement, or innovative improvement. How does the organization channel things beyond putting up a suggestion box that never gets looked at? I mean, are there
yes,
ways
yeah,
in which individual and employee ideas can be explored, can be tested, where
yes,
people can learn from their own ideas? What works, what doesn't work? How could you assess ahead of time what might work? I mean, the reality is that every good idea has a bad idea at its core. Okay. So we have to help people take their not fully formed ideas, aka the bad ideas, and develop them and work, collaboratively with others to refine to come up with the good idea. That is the way you transform and
yeah.
continually transform a high performing organization so that it doesn't fall into the trap of just, the status quo, same old, which is a decay function.
I find that I'm curious if you see this, Nick. So I find the organizations that are truly learning, where they are pushing toward the leading edge,
Mhm.
um, trying different things, what I would think of as kind of small experiments to build upon, all of that, where they're really kind of the leadership is transparent about their own learning. That's my observation. What do you see?
I think you're absolutely right. Leadership has to be part of this process, developing their own skills, but also injecting their ideas without preference into
Yeah, yeah,
whole innovation mill,
yeah.
right? Um, well, it's like anything else. We are we are pattern-based learners.
I am for sure.
We all are. We all are.
Are we all? Are we all?
Well, from the first time we open our eyes and we start watching our parents or our caregivers, and we mimic their behaviors.
Right.
So
Mhm.
people in organizations mimic what they see their leaders doing. They mimic what they see the
Yes,
successful people doing.
yes,
So
yes,
I agree with you completely that in truly learning organizations, the leaders are learners. They're always talking about what they read or what they saw or this great new idea or this thing that
yes,
maybe has nothing to do with the business,
yes, absolutely. Yes.
right?
Yeah, literature. I'm thinking of a leader who's featured in my book, Brad Wilson, who was a history student. He became ultimately went on to become CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield here in North Carolina, and he was a history major.
Yep.
And some of his greatest, and went on to get a degree in liberal arts, actually, after a JD and everything else. Later on, he went back for a liberal arts at Duke, but um, continually learning and looking to other great leaders in history. for lessons.
And it doesn't have to be highfalutin. I mean, this is the thing that leaders can do, is to make it approachable for other people. One of the best
Yeah.
discussions we had as a team, I do these all hand meetings. I referred to this before. I do these on a monthly basis. So we get everybody together, sometimes some people in a room and everybody else on Zoom, sometimes everybody on Zoom. And so I had watched this movie called The Founder. I don't know if you've seen this movie with
No,
Michael
okay,
Keaton playing Ray Kroc, the founder of McDonald's, right?
right, yeah,
It's a biopic, and it's
yeah,
actually pretty good, but there's a seminal moment in there where, he's got the McDonald's franchising thing going, and he's got like 30 restaurants and he's making like no money. He's trying to get a second mortgage on his house to keep
oh,
the business going.
well, yeah,
There's a
yeah,
guy seated at the next desk in the bank over, and he's listening to the conversation. So when Ray's been turned down for the loan, he follows him out of the bank and says, "Yeah, you're Ray Kroc. You own these McDonald's restaurants, right?" He says, "Well, yeah. I mean, I'm the one doing it." He said, "You should be rolling in money. I don't understand. Can I come take a look at your books?" And so Ray says, "Yes, go ahead." So he takes him back to the office. And after looking at the books, he says, "What business are you in?" "Well, I'm in the
right,
restaurant
yeah,
business."
yeah, yeah,
"Nope. You think you're in the restaurant
yeah,
business. You should be in the real estate business."
yes,
Because every restaurant had to be built to
yes,
McDonald's specifications on a plot of land. So they created a company called the Franchise Realty Corporation, which bought the land, and they required the McDonald's franchisees to lease the land from Franchise Realty Corporation. That eventually became McDonald's Corporation, and that's what charted the course. So this is a transformative
yes,
tipping point. So we ended
yes,
up, I ended up just raving about this movie because it was a fun movie, but
yeah,
we started talking about tipping points in business. And then I
mm,
could see them thinking about, what are the tipping points that could affect what I do as part of the business?
absolutely, yeah,
That's a learning moment.
for
It's
sure, yeah,
nothing structured, but
yeah.
it is a process of learning and applying these ideas. So,
So I'm curious, Nick. It's interesting. So I'm gonna kind of I'm just mindful of our time here. I've got a couple more questions, but my my brain is going. So I'm curious about kind of the beginning of our conversation about AI and kind of matching person to resume in very quick, skill in a resume to open opportunity, in very quick fashion. And I'm thinking about how that might where that fits with what we're talking about now, which is
mhm,
really a sense of curiosity and learning.
yep.
Um, and I always like to put in hustle. I'm always in fit. I'm like hire for curiosity and hustle over skill, unless you're a surgeon or something. But then we want lots of skill. But you know where I'm going. So how do those two things come together? Do you see that AI will eventually be able to somehow discern someone's curiosity from a page?
There are engines that can assess personal characteristics or personality characteristics
Mhm,
already.
mhm,
So that exists. How we use that is
mhm.
just very early in getting started. But really, there's a dual approach. I mean, what we say is recruit for competency,
Yes,
hire
absolutely.
for fit.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, 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 that's great.
So you need to have some basis for skills. You can get the
Yes,
most curious person, but
yes,
if you need them to be building complicated financial business models
yes.
and they don't know Excel, they're probably going to be very frustrated,
Yeah,
right?
right. Yes, of course.
So you need a certain set of skills, and then you match personality to it. But in addition, if you think about like curiosity and drive and gumption, one of the ways that you can put these tools to work for people is get people engaged in conversation about envision who you want to be in the future. Envision the types of jobs you want to have. Let's say you want to be a VP in this organization or another organization. Now, let's look at the job skill requirements for the VPs in this organization. Let's compare you to that and see what the skills
Mm,
are.
absolutely. Yeah,
You
yeah,
might
yeah,
be 10 years away from that, but what are the skills gaps that you need to close? And what are the learning paths that you can go through to close that? So you can channel that curiosity and that
yeah,
energy and so on in ways that help bring the two together. So you're not
yeah.
focusing on one or the other, but you're leveraging them both.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, and often when I'm working with clients on succession, we're looking at competencies and capacity. Absolutely. You'll get no argument from me there. But when it comes down to it, you know, if someone has an openness to, you know, a curiosity and an openness to learning, what you were talking about earlier with a similar same competency, um, you know, I always like to say, like, the least best excuse to me that I hear is we've never done it that way before.
Oh yeah,
I'm like, help, you know, well, we wouldn't have a car, we wouldn't have anything. I mean, we wouldn't have running water if, you know.
it's entirely true.
Um, I want to shift just a little bit in the time we have. In my observation, some CEOs really view their CHROs as business partners and leverage them as such, and others do not.
Hmm.
What would you say? What does the CEO who is kind of partnering with their CHRO, giving them a seat at the table in a meaningful fashion, what does that CEO see and know that someone else who's not doing that might not?
Well, sometimes it comes down to the CEOs and do they regard HR collectively as the Toby Flendersons of the world, you know, from The Office, right? If they have that view of it, there's that problem. More often, though, it comes back to the CHRO and to the capabilities of the HR team. CEOs and CHROs who have good, close relationships do so because the CHROs understand the business. They don't just understand people,
Yes,
they understand the
Nick.
business. Okay?
Yes,
So, and
you're
then they
preaching to
are
the
able
choir.
to,
Yeah.
they're able to have the conversation with the CEO
Yes.
about, okay, given this understanding of the business, where are our strengths with regard to our people? How do our people fit into the other resources and things that we need? Where are our strengths with regard to our people? Where are our weaknesses? Where are our opportunities to accelerate? And how do we build a people strategy, talent strategy that works to do that to advance the business? That's the, you know, the ideal CEO CHRO partnership.
Yes.
Where CHROs tend to get crosswise is when they get lost in the people domains, people for people's sake. Okay. So we're seeing this a lot now with people who have an over-abiding passion for DEI above everything else.
Interesting. Yeah.
Diversity is important. Equity is important.
Yes.
Inclusion is the way you get to equity and diversity. I mean, we talk about I and D at SHRM and lead with inclusion, but there are CHROs or heads of diversity who are just focusing on that to the exclusion of the business requirements. They become so issue focused that they actually are separating themselves from the culture of the business. And we see a lot of those people leaving organizations because of the fact that they get crosswise with the culture. It's not saying they
Mm,
don't have a good motivation for what they're doing, but you can't take a good motivation to the exclusion of the business need.
yeah. Yeah.
And so a lot of that gets happened. So the CHRO who doesn't understand the business or the special cause CHRO, those are the ones who are likely to be like this, where the CEO then is not going to spend a lot of time on them. They're not going to be very long in the job.
I have seen the best senior HR people, to your point, really understand the business strategy, and see them and truly see themselves, like, it's an overused word, but they truly see themselves as a partner
Oh, absolutely.
in the execution. The opposite of that I see far too often, which is someone who wants to play traffic cop. So they know the letter of the law
Yep.
and they want to enforce it. And goodness knows, part of HR's function is risk mitigation. You get no
Of
argument from me on
course.
that. But then the other piece of that is, how can we do this then?
Yes.
Not just, yeah, the light is red, don't go. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You don't want to be HR just to be the compliance cops.
Yeah. Yes. And so what would you say to um, a CEO who has not kind of fully embraced HR in partnership? What should they be looking for? How should they open that door?
Join SHRM. Um,
Good for you,
But
Nick.
I mean, we have offerings for CEOs. I mean, we have a CEO Academy, and we're
Yes.
building more offerings for CEOs. But beyond that, really learn, just like as a CEO, look, you're not an expert, depending upon where you come from, you're an expert in something, but
Yeah.
you're not going to be an expert in finance and sales and marketing and engineering and, right? Learn the same amount about people functions, not just because you've been a people manager forever, but really learn about that you do about finance functions. What do you expect from your CFO in terms of running a finance organization? And how do you kick the tires on that? Got to
Mm-hmm.
be able to kick the tires with HR to the same level of depth that you do for finance or engineering or sales or whatever, right? So at least have that level of conversancy with
Mm,
the professional function of HR.
yeah, that's great.
That will give you an understanding of what you can expect or should expect from your CHRO.
Yeah.
That in turn tells you, are you getting it? If not, why not? Do you have the right CHRO? Maybe you need somebody who can bring that to you. But you're then more informed in terms of what you need to expect from the role. And that then leads to
Yes.
a successful relationship.
Yeah, that's yes, because yeah, for obvious reasons, CEOs are focused on the business outcome,
Yeah.
and they've got oftentimes very good relationships with their COOs and the CFOs. But yeah. So before we wind down and I ask you my last question, what is the best way for someone to learn about SHRM?
Go to www.shrm.org and start exploring what we have to offer. We've got a whole range of programs. We have 7 core audiences that we serve. Each audience has a different journey and a different set of resources, a different set of experiences, but they range from the student to the HR professional to HR executives to CEOs and CXOs to politicos, people who shape the legal and regulatory environments within which organizations operate and hire people and treat people, to the enterprises themselves. And so that's an audience set for us. And then finally to social benefactors, because we have a SHRM
Mm,
Foundation
hmm.
that creates programs to advance society through better HR.
Mm, mm.
We have a range of programs, and within that, it's not only the resources on the website, but we have research. We have educational programs. We have conferences. In 2 weeks, we're going to be in Chicago for our annual conference, and I'm going to see you there. We'll have 25,000 people there in
Yeah,
Chicago.
no, I know it's
um,
huge. Yeah, it's
During,
remarkable. And you've
during,
got different tracks as well
yeah,
to your point. So if someone, because my clients are typically running organizations, so if someone wanted to learn more about the CEO Academy, for example, what would be the best way to do that?
best way to do that is, hang on a second, I'll tell you the website, but I don't have that,
That's all right.
don't have that right off the tip of
They
my
can they can probably find it on the SHRM website, yeah?
Probably on the SHRM website, but not necessarily. Yeah, it is on the SHRM website
Okay.
and you go to shrm.org/CEO-academy.
Okay, wonderful.
But this is
Fabulous.
because CEOs are a critical audience. In other words, if the CEOs aren't aligned with what we want to do with HR, then nothing else works.
Yes,
So we therefore are building a set of offerings for CEOs, including CEO Academy.
wonderful. Um, Okay, so my last question as we wind down here that I like to ask of every interviewee is what does magnificence mean to you in your own life?
Magnificence to me, so I read your question, I had a chance to think about this. Magnificence means to me elegance, but elegance in the mathematical use of the term. So elegance in mathematics is simplicity. It's
Mm,
the simplest possible answer. It's the simplest possible proof. It's the straightest line between 2 points. So for me, magnificence is when things come together, you understand them, and they fit for reasons that you can explain to other people.
mm,
That to me
mhm.
is the essence of what magnificence is. You can build massively complicated and complex things from all of that. But when you get down to the elemental simplicity and elegance, that to me is magnificence.
That's fantastic. I've not heard something even remotely close to that. That's fantastic. So kind of elegant simplicity.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Nick. My guest today has been Nick Schacht, Chief Commercial Officer. I almost said Chief Strategy Officer. Because that's what you used to do, Chief Commercial Officer at SHRM. Nick, thank you for this conversation.
Thanks very much, Sarah. This is a lot of fun as always.